My wife looked me straight in the eyes and said, "You don't own this house anymore." I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because I thought she had to be joking. Then she slid a folder across the kitchen table. Inside was a copy of the county property records. I stared at it 3 times before the words finally sank in. Neither my name nor hers was on the deed anymore. The owner of the house I'd spent 15 years paying for was now my mother-in-law. I looked back at my wife. She quietly whispered, "I was going to tell you after you got home." I wish that had been the worst part. My name is Arthur Vale. I'm 45 now, and for almost 12 years I worked overseas as an industrial electrician. The money was good, better than anything I could make back home in Ohio, but it came at a price. I'd spend anywhere from 3 to 6 months at a job site, then come home for a few weeks before heading back out again. It wasn't glamorous. Most of the time I lived in company housing surrounded by steel, concrete, and men who counted down the days until they could hug their families again. I told myself every missed birthday, every anniversary, every little league game I couldn't attend was an investment in our future. My wife, Melissa, agreed. At least that's what she always told me. "We're building something," she'd say whenever I apologized for leaving again. "And one day you won't have to." Those words kept me going through a lot of lonely nights. When we bought our house, I was 33. It wasn't huge. 3 bedrooms, a decent backyard, quiet neighborhood, nothing fancy, but it was ours. Or at least I believed it was. Because my overseas contracts paid so well, we decided I'd cover almost the entire mortgage while Melissa handled the bills at home. It made sense. She worked part-time at a dental office after our son started middle school, mostly because she wanted something to do. She handled the paperwork. I handled the income. That division of responsibility never worried me. I trusted her completely. If a tax bill arrived, she paid it. If insurance needed renewing, she renewed it. If paperwork came from the county, she'd say, "Don't worry, I took care of it," and I'd thank her. Looking back now, trust wasn't what ruined me. Blind trust did. About 4 years before everything collapsed, Melissa's mother, Diane, moved in with us temporarily after knee replacement surgery. Temporary became 6 months. 6 months became over a year. Eventually, it just became normal. Diane wasn't a terrible person. She was controlling. She had opinions about everything. How we spent money, how we raised our son, how often I traveled. She hated my overseas jobs. "You're missing your family," she'd remind me every chance she got. "I know. No amount of money gives you those years back. I know." Then quit. Easy to say when someone else wasn't paying the bills. The thing was, Melissa rarely defended me anymore. She'd just shrug. "Mom has a point." That stung more than Diane's criticism ever could. Still, I kept working. Every contract brought us closer to paying off the house. That goal mattered to me. I grew up watching my father lose our family home after he got laid off. I still remember standing on the sidewalk while strangers walked through our living room during an open house. I promised myself I'd never let my own family go through that. Owning our home outright wasn't just financial. It was emotional. It meant safety, stability, something nobody could take away, or so I thought. About 18 months before I discovered the truth, Melissa called while I was working in Norway. She sounded stressed. "The county reassessed property values." "Okay." "Our taxes went way up." "How much?" She told me. It wasn't pleasant, but it wasn't catastrophic either. "We'll manage," I said. Then she hesitated. "Mom thinks we should do some estate planning." I remember laughing. "We're in our 40s. "I know. She just thinks we should protect the house." "Protect it from what?" "You know, lawsuits, creditors, unexpected things." I wasn't worried. We had insurance. No debt besides the mortgage. Steady income. What exactly does she want to do? "Oh, nothing yet." That should have been the end of the conversation. Instead, Melissa added one sentence that didn't mean much at the time. I'll talk to a lawyer just to understand our options. Sure, I said. Just don't sign anything without me. I wouldn't. She answered so quickly I never questioned it. Months passed. Life stayed busy. She'd send pictures from home. Our son fishing. The dog sleeping on my side of the bed. Fresh paint in the kitchen. Everything looked normal. Whenever I asked about paperwork, she'd say, all handled. When I came home that Christmas, nothing seemed different. The house was decorated. Melissa hugged me. Our son tackled me before I could even get my suitcase through the door. Diane made her famous pot roast. Felt normal. There were tiny moments that bothered me. Mail disappeared before I saw it. Melissa started keeping important documents in a locked filing cabinet we'd never had before. Once I asked for the mortgage statement because I wanted to see how much principal we'd paid off. She smiled. I already filed it away. No problem. I'll look later. I'll find it. She never did. I forgot about it. Or maybe I chose to. A few weeks later, I left for another project. This one lasted nearly 5 months. Long shifts, bad internet, different time zones. We talked less than usual. Whenever I called, Melissa sounded distracted. I'll call tomorrow. Tomorrow became next week. I blamed the distance. Work, life, marriage after 15 years wasn't always exciting. That didn't mean anything was wrong. At least that's what I kept telling myself. Then my contract ended early. The company wrapped the project ahead of schedule. I flew home almost 2 weeks earlier than planned. I didn't tell anyone. I wanted to surprise them. I imagined walking through the front door, Melissa screaming, my son laughing, the dog losing his mind. Instead, I pulled into my own driveway and saw a moving truck parked outside. 2 men were carrying furniture onto the lawn, and standing on the porch was Diane, holding a clipboard, watching them like she was the one in charge. When she saw my truck, the color drained from her face. She whispered something toward the front door. A second later, Melissa came running outside. She didn't look surprised to see me. She looked terrified. Melissa froze halfway down the front steps. For a second, neither of us said anything. Then she forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Arthur, you're home early. I am. I looked past her toward the moving truck. What's going on? She glanced over her shoulder before answering. We're rearranging some things. I looked at the couch sitting in the front yard. Our dining room table was wrapped in moving blankets. Half the garage was already empty. That doesn't look like rearranging. Diane stepped in before Melissa could answer. They're taking a few pieces to storage. Why? Because we need the space. For what? Neither of them answered. One of the movers walked over holding a clipboard. Excuse me, ma'am, he said to Diane. Where do you want the bedroom set? He didn't ask Melissa. He asked Diane. That bothered me more than it should have. I walked into the house without waiting for permission. The place felt different. Not physically, emotionally. Family pictures were missing from the hallway. The framed vacation photo from Myrtle Beach had disappeared. The painting Melissa always loved was gone. Boxes lined the living room walls. Our son, Ethan, came downstairs carrying another box. He stopped the second he saw me. Dad. He dropped everything and hugged me. A real hug, the kind that almost knocks the air out of you. You didn't tell us you were coming home. I wanted to surprise you. He pulled away and looked at his mom, then at his grandmother, then back at me. Something wasn't right. Dad. He stopped himself. What? He swallowed hard. Nothing. Melissa interrupted. Why don't you go finish packing your room? Packing. I turned back toward her. Packing for what? She rubbed her temples. Arthur, let's sit down. No. Please. No. Tell me what's happening. She looked at Diane. Diane gave her the slightest nod. That tiny gesture told me everything I needed to know. Melissa wasn't leading this conversation. She was following someone else's script. We're moving. The words landed like a brick. What? We're moving. I can hear that. Why? The house is too much. No, it isn't. The taxes. We've handled higher taxes before. The maintenance. I pay for maintenance. The neighborhood is changing. It hasn't changed. Every reason sounded like it had been rehearsed. Every answer sounded weaker than the one before. Finally, I asked the obvious question. When did we decide this? Melissa looked away. A few months ago. A few months ago? You were overseas. So you decided to sell our house while I was overseas? She didn't answer. Instead, she quietly said, "We didn't exactly sell it." My stomach tightened. What does that mean? Before she could respond, a black SUV pulled into the driveway. A man in a gray suit stepped out carrying a leather briefcase. He looked around until he spotted me. "You must be Mr. Vale." "I am." He walked over. "I'm sorry. I wasn't aware you'd returned." "Who are you?" He introduced himself as a real estate attorney. "Not ours. The family's attorney." That wording immediately caught my attention. "The family's?" He nodded. "We were expecting to finalize occupancy today." "I have no idea what you're talking about." His expression changed. He genuinely looked confused. "I thought you had been informed." "Informed about what?" He slowly opened his briefcase. "I probably shouldn't discuss legal matters without everyone's agreement." Melissa looked like she wanted the ground to swallow her whole. Diane folded her arms. "It's already done." The attorney hesitated. Then he handed me a copy of a recorded deed. I stared at the first page. Property address. Our address. Grantors. Melissa and Arthur Vale. Grantee. Diane Mitchell. I blinked. Read it again. Then a third time. "This is fake." The attorney frowned. "No, sir. My signature is on here." "Yes. I never signed this." Silence. I looked closer. At first glance, it looked like my signature. The shape, the letters, the slant, but something felt off. Not dramatically, just enough. "I didn't sign this." Melissa started crying. Diane didn't. She simply said, "You signed a power of attorney." I turned toward her. "What? Remember? 2 years ago." My mind raced. Then I remembered. Before leaving for a long overseas assignment, Melissa had asked me to sign a limited power of attorney so she could renew vehicle registrations, deal with insurance paperwork, and sign tax documents if something came up while I was gone. Our attorney had explained it. Limited, specific, routine, nothing unusual. I remembered signing it. I also remembered asking twice if it covered real estate. The attorney at the time had smiled. "No, this is only for the listed financial matters." That's why I'd agreed. I looked at the new attorney. What power of attorney was used for this transfer? He opened another folder. "This durable power of attorney." He slid it across the table. I'd never seen it before. Different date, different wording, broader authority, far broader. It allowed Melissa to act on my behalf in virtually every financial matter, including real estate. I flipped through every page, then stopped. There it was again. My signature, or something pretending to be my signature. I looked at Melissa. "When did I sign this?" She couldn't answer. "Melissa." Tears rolled down her face. When?" "It was handled." "Handled? I thought it was legal." "You thought." Diane stepped between us. "It was legal." I ignored her. I kept looking at my wife. "You watched someone forge my name?" "I didn't think." "You didn't think?" "I trusted the lawyer." "What lawyer?" "The one Mom found." "Of course, Diane." I turned back toward the attorney standing in my kitchen. "Did you verify any of this?" "We relied on notarized documents." "Where's the notary?" He named someone I'd never met. Someone from a town nearly 80 miles away. A place I'd never even visited during the time the document claimed I was there. Now even the attorney looked uncomfortable. "When exactly were you overseas?" he asked. I told him the dates. He compared them to the notarization. Then his face changed. The document states you appeared in person. I was on another continent. Nobody spoke. Even the movers had stopped carrying furniture. The house had gone completely silent. Finally, the attorney closed his folder. I think today's transfer of possession needs to be postponed. Diane immediately objected. You can't do that. I absolutely can. He looked directly at me. Mr. Vale, I strongly recommend you obtain independent legal counsel before anyone moves another box. Melissa broke down completely, but it wasn't guilt that caught my attention. It was fear, because she kept looking at Diane, not me, as if she was afraid of disappointing her mother more than losing her husband. And in that moment, I realized something that hurt almost as much as the forged signature. This hadn't happened overnight. This had been building for years, and I was the last person to know. The movers left within the hour. The attorney practically ordered them to stop until the ownership questions were resolved. Boxes stayed where they were. Furniture remained half-loaded. By sunset, the house looked like someone had pressed pause in the middle of a move. No one had much to say. Ethan disappeared into his room. Diane shut herself in the guest bedroom. Melissa sat at the kitchen table staring at a mug of coffee that had gone cold hours earlier. I finally broke the silence. Start at the beginning. She nodded without looking up. I don't even know where the beginning is anymore. Try. For a long moment, she just cried. Then she wiped her eyes. It started after you took that Norway contract. The one 2 years ago? She nodded. Mom kept saying we were one accident away from losing everything. I leaned back in my chair. We had insurance. I know. We had savings. I know. No credit card debt. I know. So what exactly was the emergency? She took a shaky breath. She convinced me that because you worked overseas. If something happened to you, probate could take forever. I frowned. What does probate have to do with putting the house in her name? It didn't at first. That answer caught my attention. What do you mean? The lawyer she found started by talking about estate planning. Okay. He said families often transfer assets to trusted relatives. I stared at her. You trusted your mother more than your husband? She flinched. That's not how it was presented. How was it presented? He said it would only be temporary. Temporary. I'd heard that word before. Diane's stay after surgery had been temporary too. Melissa continued. He said once everything was reorganized legally, ownership could be transferred back without any problems. I rubbed my forehead. And you believed him? I wanted to. That wasn't the answer I expected. I was scared. Of what? She looked at me for the first time all evening. Of losing everything if something happened to you. There was genuine fear in her voice. Not rehearsed. Not fake. Real. For a second, I almost felt sorry for her. Then I remembered the forged signature. You still haven't explained that. She closed her eyes. I never saw anyone forge it. So how did it get there? I signed electronic documents they emailed. They? The attorney's office. And my signature magically appeared? I assumed. Her voice faded. You assumed I had signed something earlier. No. Then what? She whispered so quietly I almost missed it. I stopped asking questions. That sentence hung in the air. Not because it explained everything. Because it explained enough. The next morning I met with my own attorney. His name was Greg. I'd known him casually through a friend, but we'd never worked together. He spent almost an hour reading every document without saying much. Finally, he looked up. Did you sign this? No. You sure? I'm positive. He nodded. I believe you. That was the first time in 2 days someone had simply believed me. So what happens now? First, we verify everything. And if it's forged, then the transfer could be invalid. Could. Arthur, real life isn't television. He folded his hands. Even when fraud exists, Unwinding property transfers can take months. Months. Possibly longer. I let out a slow breath. What about my wife? He chose his words carefully. That's going to depend on what she knew. I honestly don't know anymore. Greg nodded. That's actually believable. I frowned. What do you mean? I've seen situations where one spouse manipulates the other. You think that's what happened? I think your mother-in-law had a lot of influence. Influence. That was a polite word. Manipulation felt more accurate. Before leaving, Greg asked one more question. Who paid the mortgage? I did. Every payment? Almost every one. Keep every record you have. That turned out to be easier said than done. Because when I logged into the mortgage account that evening, couldn't. My password didn't work. Neither did the recovery email. The contact phone number had been changed. Someone had removed my access completely. I called the bank immediately. After verifying my identity, the representative sounded confused. Sir, according to our records, you requested those changes last year. No, I didn't. They were submitted with supporting documentation. What documentation? I'm afraid I can't discuss that over the phone. My chest tightened. Can you at least tell me who signed it? A pause. It appears your authorized representative handled the request. Melissa, or whoever had been acting in my name. When I hung up, I realized this wasn't just about one forged deed. Someone had systematically taken control of every piece of paperwork connected to our finances. That night, I searched through the filing cabinet Melissa had kept locked. She didn't stop me. She just watched. Inside were neatly organized folders. Taxes, insurance, utility bills, mortgage statements. Then I found a folder labeled simply, Legal. Inside were emails, letters, meeting notes. I noticed something strange immediately. Many of the letters weren't addressed to Melissa. They were addressed to Diane. Not copied, not forwarded, addressed directly to her. I held one up. Why was your mother receiving correspondence about our house? Melissa looked genuinely surprised. I never saw those. You never opened this folder? I wasn't allowed to. I blinked. What? She looked embarrassed. Mom said she'd organize everything because legal paperwork overwhelmed me. That sounded ridiculous. Until I remembered something. Melissa hated paperwork. Always had. Tax forms stressed her out. Insurance renewals confused her. Whenever official letters arrived, she'd ask me to explain them. After I started working overseas, Diane slowly became the person interpreting everything. One envelope after another. One decision after another. One signature after another. Greg's words echoed in my head. Manipulation. Not proof, but a pattern. The next clue came from Ethan. He knocked on my bedroom door around midnight. You awake? Yeah. He stepped inside and closed the door. I need to tell you something. I sat up. What is it? He looked nervous. I think Mom wanted to tell you. When? A lot of times. I stayed quiet. He continued. Every time she'd bring it up, Grandma would shut it down. How? He doesn't need to worry while he's working. Or, we'll explain after the next contract. Or, if he comes home now, he'll ruin everything. I felt sick. Did your mom ever agree? Not really. What do you mean? She'd argue. That surprised me. She argued with Diane? He nodded. I heard them. What were they saying? He thought for a moment. The last fight. His voice cracked. Grandma told Mom that if she backed out now, she'd lose the house too. I stared at him. What does that mean? I don't know. Neither did he. But suddenly this felt bigger than a controlling mother-in-law. Someone had been threatening my wife. The question was, with what? That sentence stayed with me all night. If she backed out now, she'd lose the house too. It didn't make sense. If Diane already believed the house belonged to her, why threaten Melissa? Unless Melissa no longer had control over the situation either. The next morning, Greg called before I even finished my coffee. I've got an update. Good or bad? A little of both. I grabbed a notepad. What did you find? The attorney who prepared the transfer documents is retired. Convenient. So I thought. He disappeared? No. He voluntarily surrendered his license about 8 months ago. I sat up straighter. For what? There were several complaints involving questionable estate planning and real estate transfers. My stomach tightened. Criminal. Not that I'm aware of. So what does that mean for us? It means we're not the only people asking questions. That was the first hopeful thing I'd heard in days. Greg continued. I also tracked down the notary. The one who supposedly watched me sign papers while I was overseas? Yes. And she says she never met you. I closed my eyes. There it was. The first clear crack in the story. She admitted that? She admitted she notarized documents based on representations from the attorney's office. Isn't that illegal? It can be. So she just stamped papers without seeing the signer? I'm not saying that. What are you saying? I'm saying she remembers something being unusual. That wasn't a victory, but it was enough for Greg to start building a case. Before hanging up, he gave me one instruction. Don't confront Diane until we have everything documented. I promised I wouldn't. I lasted about 6 hours. When I got home, Diane was sitting on the back patio as if nothing had happened. She looked up from her crossword puzzle. You're home. I've got a question. I imagine you have several. I stayed standing. Did you know that attorney lost his license? She didn't even blink. People retire. He didn't retire. She folded the newspaper. I don't know anything about his career. You trusted him enough to transfer my house. Our house needed protection. There it is again. What? Protection? She sighed. You still don't understand. No, Diane, I really don't. For the first time, there was irritation in her voice. You were gone all the time. I was working. You chose work. I chose providing for my family. You chose money. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The mortgage wasn't paying itself. We would have survived. Would we? She stood up. You missed birthdays. I know. You missed holidays. I know. You missed Ethan growing up. Every word landed exactly where she intended. I hated leaving, but you kept leaving. Because Melissa and I agreed. She looked at me with something that almost resembled pity. No. You convinced yourself you agreed. That sentence hit harder than I expected. Not because I believed it, because for one terrible second, I wondered if Melissa had quietly stopped wanting this life years ago. I walked back inside before the conversation became a shouting match. Melissa was waiting in the kitchen. I heard. I'm sure you did. She looked exhausted. I need to tell you something. I crossed my arms. I'm listening. She reached into a drawer and pulled out a small notebook. I've been keeping this. I opened it. At first I thought it was a journal. It wasn't. It was a record. Dates, phone calls, meetings, arguments. Every conversation she'd had with Diane about the house over the past 18 months. She'd written everything down. Not perfectly, not every day, but enough. I flipped through the pages. One entry read, Mom says Arthur doesn't need to know until everything is finished. Another, asked if we should call Arthur. Mom got angry. Then one that made me stop completely. Lawyer says reversing this later will be easy. I'm still uncomfortable. I looked up. Why write all this? She answered honestly. Because I started feeling like something wasn't right. So why didn't you call me? I tried. She stood and walked to the cabinet above the refrigerator. From the top shelf, she pulled down an old phone. My backup phone. I frowned. Why do you have a backup phone? Because Mom started checking mine. That caught me completely off guard. Melissa unlocked it and handed it to me. Dozens of unsent messages. Some were only a few words. Can you call me? Something feels wrong. I don't understand what we're doing anymore. Others were much longer. She'd written them but never sent them. I looked at her. Why didn't you hit send? Her eyes filled with tears. Every time I was about to, she glanced toward the hallway. She'd convinced me I was overreacting. I didn't know what to say. I was still angry, still hurt, still struggling with the fact that my signature had been forged. But for the first time, I could also see someone who had been manipulated one decision at a time. Not innocent, but not entirely in control either. That evening, Ethan came downstairs holding an old cardboard box. I found these in the garage. Inside were folders from before Diane moved in. Mortgage statements, bank correspondence, insurance renewals, everything. Melissa looked confused. I thought those were shredded. They weren't, Ethan said. I hid them. Both of us stared at him. You what? He shrugged awkwardly. I saw Grandma putting them in trash bags last year. Why? I don't know. So I grabbed a box before the garbage truck came. I felt my heart pounding. Those documents covered nearly 10 years. Every mortgage payment, every refinance offer we declined, every tax statement. Greg would love this. As I sorted through the paperwork, one envelope slipped onto the floor. It had never been opened. It was addressed to both Melissa and me. From the county recorder's office, postmarked almost 16 months earlier. I carefully opened it. Inside was an official notice acknowledging that ownership of the property had changed. It also stated that any objections should be filed within a specified period. I looked at Melissa. You never saw this? She shook her head. No, the envelope had been opened before, then resealed. Someone had intercepted it before either of us ever read it. There was only one person in the house who regularly collected the mail before anyone else got home. Diane. Suddenly, years of little moments started fitting together. The missing mail, the locked filing cabinet, the new attorney, the changed passwords, the intercepted notices. None of it looked accidental anymore. It looked like a carefully built wall designed to keep me away from the truth for as long as possible. And if Ethan hadn't rescued that box, I might never have been able to prove it. Greg called me the next afternoon before I even had a chance to bring him the box Ethan had saved. I've got good news. I hadn't heard those words in what felt like forever. I'm listening. The county agreed to place a notice on the property while we sort this out. What does that do? It doesn't decide ownership, but it tells anyone searching the title that there's an active legal dispute. So Diane can't quietly sell the house. Exactly. For the first time since I'd come home, I felt like we were finally slowing the train before it went completely off the tracks. I drove straight to Greg's office with the documents. When he saw the old mortgage statements, canceled checks, insurance records, and unopened county notice, he smiled. I was hoping you'd find something like this. Is it enough? It's not one document. He tapped the stack. It's the pattern. He spent nearly an hour organizing everything into a timeline. Every payment I'd made, every legal change, every letter that had mysteriously stopped reaching me. Then he stopped at one page. This is interesting. It was a mortgage statement from just over a year earlier. What am I looking at? The mailing address. I leaned closer. It had been changed. Not to a post office box. Not to our house. To Diane's workplace. I looked at Greg. I never authorized that. I know. And Melissa? We'll ask. When I got home that evening, I placed the statement on the kitchen table. Melissa stared at it. I've never seen this. Are you sure? She nodded immediately. Mom handled the mail by then. That answer didn't surprise me anymore. What surprised me was what happened next. Melissa stood up. I'm done. I frowned. What do you mean? She walked down the hallway toward the guest room. I followed. She opened the door. Dad's coming home tonight, she said to Diane. That wasn't true. Her father had passed away years earlier. Then I realized she wasn't talking to her father. She was talking to me, the man of the house. the husband she'd stopped standing beside. She looked directly at her mother. "You need to leave." Diane didn't move. "I live here." "No. I own this house." Melissa shook her head. "No, you don't." Diane laughed. "I have the deed. You have paper. I have the law. You have lies." The room went silent. For the first time since I'd known her, Melissa wasn't backing down. "You lied to me. You manipulated me. You told me everything could be reversed. You told me Arthur would understand later. You told me nobody would get hurt." Her voice cracked. "I almost destroyed my own marriage because I kept believing you." Diane slowly stood. "I did everything for this family." "No," Melissa replied. "You did everything so you could control this family." That sentence landed like a hammer. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then Diane looked at me. "You think she's innocent?" I answered honestly. "No." Melissa closed her eyes. "I don't." I continued. "But I also don't think she planned this." Diane smiled. "So now you're both against me." "No," I said quietly. "We're finally looking at the same facts." She grabbed her purse. "You'll regret this." Melissa's voice stayed calm. "I've regretted listening to you for 2 years." Diane walked out without another word. The front door closed. None of us moved. The house felt strangely quiet. Not empty, peaceful. It lasted less than 24 hours. The next morning Greg called again. "This isn't over." "What happened?" "Diane hired another attorney." "I expected that." "So did I." "Then why do you sound worried?" "Because she's claiming Melissa knowingly participated in the transfer and was the primary decision maker." I looked toward the living room where Melissa and Ethan were eating breakfast. "If that works, it could expose Melissa to serious legal consequences." I closed my eyes. Of course. The moment Diane realized she couldn't keep the house, she shifted the blame. Greg wasn't surprised. People who manipulate others often protect themselves first. So what do? We tell the truth. Simple words. Not a simple process. Over the next several weeks we gave statements, produced records, answered questions. The notary admitted she had relied on procedures she should have questioned. The retired attorney refused to comment. Bank employees produced account change requests. Email records showed nearly every major communication had gone through Diane. Then came the mediation session. Instead of a courtroom, all 4 of us sat around a conference table. 2 attorneys, a retired judge serving as mediator. Greg leaned over and whispered one sentence. "Just answer honestly." That was all I planned to do. The mediator began with Diane. She insisted she'd only been trying to protect family assets. Then Melissa spoke. She admitted she'd signed documents without understanding them. She admitted she should have called me. She admitted she had ignored her instincts. When it was my turn, I didn't attack anyone. I simply explained why I'd spent 12 years working overseas. Not because I loved being away. Not because I cared more about money. Because I wanted my family to have something permanent. A home no one could take from us. By the time I finished, nobody at the table was looking at the paperwork anymore. They were looking at the people. And for the first time, this stopped being about a deed. It became about trust. The mediator asked Diane one final question. "If Mr. Vale had known about this before the transfer, do you believe he would have agreed?" She hesitated, just for a second. Then she quietly answered, "No." That single word changed everything. After Diane admitted she didn't believe I would have agreed to the transfer, the room stayed quiet for several long seconds. The mediator finally broke the silence. "I think we've identified the heart of the problem." Nobody argued. Over the next few weeks, the attorneys worked through documents, witness statements, and records from the county. Greg kept reminding me not to celebrate too early. "Cases like this don't end with one dramatic moment," he said. "They end with paperwork." He was right. There wasn't some Hollywood courtroom speech. There wasn't a judge pounding a gavel. There wasn't a dramatic confession. There was simply enough evidence showing that the transfer had been built on documents that couldn't be trusted. The disputed deed was set aside. The property records were corrected. The title was restored. When Greg called with the news, I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just sat in my truck in the grocery store parking lot for almost 10 minutes, staring through the windshield. For the first time in months, I could finally breathe. The house was legally ours again. But the harder question remained. Could my marriage be? A legal victory doesn't erase betrayal. Melissa understood that. She never asked me to pretend everything was fine. She never said, "Can we just move on?" Instead, one evening after dinner, she sat across from me at the same kitchen table where this nightmare had really begun. "I owe you an apology," she said. I stayed quiet. She continued, "Not because Mom manipulated me." She shook her head. "That's part of the story. It's not an excuse." She took a deep breath. I stopped asking questions because it was easier than having difficult conversations. She looked down at her hands. "I told myself I was protecting you while you were overseas." Then she looked back at me. "The truth is, I was avoiding conflict." That was probably the most honest thing she'd said in years. "I should have called you." "Yes." "I should have trusted you instead of assuming everyone else knew better." "Yes." "I should have listened to the voice in my head that kept telling me this felt wrong." Another long silence settled between us. Finally, I asked the question I'd been carrying since the day I came home. "Did you ever stop loving me?" She answered immediately, "No." "Then why did it feel like you chose everyone else over me?" Tears filled her eyes again. "Because little by little, I did. Not intentionally. Not all at once. One small compromise. One delayed conversation. One signature she didn't fully understand. One decision she convinced herself she'd explain later. Until she woke up one day and realized she was standing on the opposite side of the table from her own husband. It wasn't a satisfying answer, but it was an honest one. Honesty was something we hadn't had in a long time. We started counseling a month later. Not because anyone forced us. Because neither of us wanted to spend the rest of our lives wondering if we'd given up too quickly. It wasn't easy. Some sessions ended with us driving home in silence. Others reminded us why we'd married in the first place. The counselor said something I'll never forget. "Trust usually isn't destroyed in one moment. It's weakened by 1,000 moments where people choose comfort over honesty." That sentence stayed with me. It applied to both of us. A few months later, Diane sent a letter. Not through lawyers. Personally. Inside was a handwritten apology. It wasn't perfect. She still believed she'd been trying to protect the family. But for the first time, she admitted she'd crossed lines she had no right to cross. She also admitted she'd convinced herself that because I was gone so often, she knew what was best. I appreciated the apology. I didn't pretend it fixed everything. We decided to keep our distance. There wasn't any yelling. No dramatic final confrontation. Just boundaries. Sometimes that's healthier than revenge. As for Ethan, he surprised me the most. One afternoon, we were fixing the fence in the backyard when he suddenly said, "I thought we were going to lose this place." "So did I. I'm glad we didn't." He leaned on the shovel. "You know what scared me the most?" "What?" "Not losing the house." I looked at him. "Losing you and Mom." That hit harder than anything that had happened in mediation. Kids notice more than we think they do. He hadn't cared about property records. He cared about whether his parents were still a family. That conversation changed something in me. A few months later, I turned down another overseas contract. The pay was incredible. A year earlier, I wouldn't have hesitated. This time I did. Instead, I accepted a local job that paid less but let me sleep in my own bed every night. Some people thought I was crazy. Maybe financially I was. But I finally understood something I'd missed for years. Providing for your family isn't only about money. Sometimes your presence is worth more than another paycheck. We still live in that same house. The walls have been repainted. The guest room became my home office. The locked filing cabinet is gone. Now every important document is stored where both Melissa and I can access it. Every financial decision gets discussed together. Every signature waits until both of us understand exactly what we're signing. Takes a little longer. I don't mind. If this experience taught me anything, it's that trust isn't something you hand to someone once and forget about. It's something both people protect every single day. People sometimes ask me what the biggest lesson was. They expect me to say, never trust anyone. But that's not my answer. My answer is this: trust the people you love. Just don't outsource your responsibility to stay informed. Love isn't weakened by honest questions. Healthy relationships make room for them. If I'd asked more questions, if Melissa had spoken up sooner, if either of us had been willing to have uncomfortable conversations before they became impossible ones, our family could have avoided the hardest year of our lives. Thankfully, we were given a chance to rebuild. Not everyone gets that chance. And I don't take it for granted anymore.